Hello, my name is Buddy Childress, and I'm Executive Director of Needles Eye Ministries. We are really happy to have you with us today for a monthly speaker series. We hope you enjoy it.
It's absolutely my privilege to introduce Lara Finnie to you today. We are excited because her husband Tony is able to join us again today. Welcome, Tony. We're glad that you're here. Lara is an amazing person and has a wonderful message, so I'm very excited that you all are able to be with us today. Lara is a graduate of the College of William and Mary, and she'll tell you a little bit about how she took the next step to become a teacher, and then share a little bit about how she ended up at Circuit City. And as you all probably know, having been in Richmond for some time, she had yet another opportunity when Circuit City folded up its doors and closed. And she is now an instructional designer for CarMax's Operational Excellence team. Now, Lara happens to be fluent, I now understand, in 3 languages. So I knew about French. I did not know till yesterday that she's also fluent in Spanish. But for her purposes of her job, you need to know that she's fluent in engineer. So her job is to take engineer and turn it into English. So she'll tell us a little bit more about that today. Lara and Tony have 3 children, and if you look at Lara, this is going to shock you, and Tony too, for that matter. They have 3 grandchildren also. It's quite amazing to me. They worship at West End Presbyterian. I know we have some West End Pres folks here. And those are kind of some of the facts about Lara, but I think what you're really going to notice about her is her passion. And one of her passions is knowing Christ. Another of her passions is living that out. She has formed a ministry called Priceless Treasure, which is a women's ministry. And she also, through her church, has been doing a Bible study with 2 Congolese women who happen to speak French. And so that is one of the ways that she is serving in our community these days. One of the things that I really appreciate about having Lara speak to us today is that we've often had sort of CEO types in the speaker series. For example, Tom Gallagher next month, which is wonderful. We have so much to learn from our civic and business leaders. Lara is someone who's leading from the middle tier of her company. And that is a special privilege for those of us who are just the normal, average, everyday business people to get to hear from one of our own. So it is really a joy and honor to introduce to you Lara Finnie.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm an instructional designer, which is a fancy term for a trainer. And I do training and development and have done that for some time. I am with CarMax. I work with the continuous improvement group with the engineers who help make things better. And I work with them with Lean Sigma, and one of them is here with me today, so I'm really afraid she'll out me on how much I don't know. But anyway, I have enjoyed that job quite a bit, and one thing I am grateful for with this opportunity is to be able to use some of those training skills to do what I do, but for the thing I have a passion about. So now you've been forewarned. I'm a trainer, and if you've ever attended a training class that was any good, you know that you had to be engaged. And I know on every table there are pens and there is paper, and so every person right now, if you would please, get a card, a piece of paper, and a pen. And I know if your neighbor's sitting there saying, no, I'm eating, I'm busy, help them find a piece of paper and a pen, because it can be a scary time reaching for that pen in an unknown situation. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we say and what we think. So let's find out what we think. This is just a word association. I'm going to give you a few words and write down the first thing that comes to your mind with these words. So number 1, the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the word payday. What do you think? Write down that first reaction. Maybe it's an image, so just describe that image. One word, couple phrases. Number 2, what do you think of when I say day off? Day off. Number 3, cell phone. What do you think of when I say cell phone? And I am checking the husband-wife teams to see if things were delegated, because that's just cheating, you know. I don't care how long you've been married. The next one, meetings. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say meetings? Number 5, your coworkers. First thing that comes to mind when I say your coworkers. And the last one, your boss. What do you think of when I say your boss? And the squabbling begins. Let me start by telling you a little bit about how I came to have a faith in God and a faith in Christ. I grew up going to church, going to Sunday school. I loved Sunday school. I loved Jesus. That worked for me as a little kid. And as I got to high school, I began to think of church in a different way. I began to see, I knew God was real, I knew Jesus was real, but what I began to see at church was that it demanded a whole lot. And there was always something to be done. And overall, I was a good kid as a teenager, but my family really went through a lot of struggles. And there were a lot of times where it didn't feel like the church was there. It was just this constant demand for energy and commitment. And I left home to go to college with the sense of, I'm done with church. I'm done with those churchy people who church. And I went to college, and every now and then I would go to church, like when Mom and Dad came to visit, but really wasn't interested. Every now and then maybe I'd be invited to a Bible study and I'd try it, but I really wasn't interested. I still had my faith. I still looked to God because I knew that was a real thing, but that was kind of where it ended. And I can really tell at that point in my life, I definitely had a hole in my heart that something was missing. So in my great logical way, because I went to William and Mary, full of logical people. So in my great logical way, I decided I will take the safe road. My plan is to get a job teaching and then get married. Sounds safe. So after I left college, I got a teaching job, and I started once again thinking maybe I'll try this church thing. First church I went to, I thought, well, it was a nice service, and I started asking questions like, do you have a group for young singles? And they said, no, but you can start one. I didn't go back. I wasn't interested in church and churchy church people. So I was done with that. I continued with my teaching. I met someone. I got married that summer later, and I taught for another year. Well, that part of my plan fell apart. I really didn't enjoy teaching high school. I know many of you are shocked. So I left teaching high school, but I really had no idea what I wanted to do. So I worked part-time in a bookstore. Part-time, I taught a GED class, which I really enjoyed. But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I still had this hole in my heart. So I started asking about Bible studies. I didn't ask about church. I was so way over church. But I asked about Bible studies. So I came upon this Bible study. It was rather large, women's Bible study. And I started going there. Nobody asked me to do anything except show up. And I met people in smaller groups, and they enjoyed being with me for me. And this Bible study was made up of women who went to all different churches. And because of that, so nobody felt isolated, they had a polite agreement that you didn't talk about what church you went to. So as I decided, I want to look into church, I would ask people and they'd say, I'm not supposed to talk about church. So this one woman that I seemed to have a connection with as far as, when we would talk about faith things, I seemed to agree with her. So I thought, I got to find out where she goes to church. And she goes, oh, I'm not supposed to tell you. And I said, so can you whisper it to me? So she told me where she went to church. It was this church that met in the gymnasium of Bird Middle School. There were all of 100 people there. Their idea of church was to pack it up and put it in a trailer and bring it back the next week. I thought, I like that idea of church. So somewhere between this Bible study with a bunch of women who let me be me and didn't ask for a whole lot, and this church that could pack up and fit everything it owned in a trailer and a station wagon, I realized that Jesus was a real part of my life. And that hole in my heart was filled with somebody holy. And to go from having a hole to holiness is huge. And so from that point, anything that added to my life became a blessing rather than something that I was trying to shove in that hole and make it feel real. Well, it was just God's divine timing, because not long after that, that marriage, that part 2 of my plan, it fell apart. And it wasn't pretty. And it hurt. And it was ugly and devastating. But God. And I knew, because I had Christians to lean on, because I had a church family to lean on, because I had Christ to lean on, that I survived that. And as you've heard from the introduction, I am married, and between the two of us, we have 3 children and 3 grandchildren, and that's just God, if you ask me. That's God's redemption. So today I want to share with you how I live my work life. The title of my message is The Heart of an Individual Contributor, Capable and God-Reliant. So I've got 3 points for you. One is why talk about the heart at work. The next will be how important is the individual contributor. And finally, how are capable and God-reliant compatible? So let's start with why talk about the heart at work. Well, you got to talk about the heart at work because we talk. And there are a couple scriptures in the New Testament that Jesus tells us, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Ooh, is that where that stuff comes from? Here's another one. The things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart. For out of the heart come evil thoughts. Both of those references are from Matthew. Something's starting in here, and it's coming out at work. Think about those meetings you sit in. How often do you go, oh, I'm really glad I can't talk right now because it wouldn't be pretty? We all get in that position. Here's something else to think about. We may have this heart where these things start, and we may have this mouth that echoes what we're saying, but we also have free will. We have free will to choose whether we say those things or not. So out of curiosity, I Googled 2 words, fired Facebook. The articles that popped up because people had gotten on Facebook and mouthed off about coworkers, customers, their boss, the company. Wow. Out of the overflow of the heart, the fingers type. Not good. So what do you do with this? Couple of things that I do, because as you may have noticed, I like to talk. So that means my heart and my brain are always very busy. So my first counterattack, as I'm driving down 288 every morning, I pray from David's Psalm, Psalm 19, verse 14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, my God, my rock, and my redeemer. I was walking down the hall today with a friend of mine who went to yesterday's thing, and she noticed something that was very frustrating, and I looked at her and I went, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart. And she goes, oh yeah. We needed that. The second thing is I have to be willing not to speak. Did you know that just because something pops in my mind, it does not have to come out of my mouth? If you're an extrovert, that may be a revelation. If you're an introvert, you've never had that problem. But I feel you, extroverts, I feel you. The third thing, confess. When you've said things you shouldn't have said, make amends. In a previous job, I was on a project with a relatively frustrating person. I'm sure it was them and not me. I said something I shouldn't have said, and I did make amends to that person, but it definitely messed up the relationship for that project. So I went to my boss and I said, I got to let you know something I did that I shouldn't have done. And I explained to her the situation, and she looked at me with just this expression of disbelief. Why would anybody confess to messing that up like that? Why would you tell me what you've done? Because I am clean before my God. I have to live with myself. I have to live with this heart. And I knew regardless of how that played out, when I am honest before God, He takes care of the rest, my jobs included. The last thing that keeps my heart and my mouth in check, I am not alone. Remember I said that hole in my heart was filled by someone holy? I am not alone. So it's not like I have to sit in a meeting and go, oh, I got to have all the answers. God's right there. Christ is going to prompt me as I need to. So the next point of what's the big deal about being an individual contributor? So I work for a company with 17,000 associates. I would say roughly 15,000 of them are not in management positions. That's a lot of individual contributors. When I was with Circuit City, I was the manager for the training and recruiting departments for the credit card division. I had an office, I had a staff, I had all kinds of bells and whistles. And 9 years later, I'm in a cube as an individual contributor. So my pride says, hello, Lord, I had a career. But I know God has a different plan for me, and I need to be a good individual contributor. Let me tell you about an individual contributor that I was impressed with. His name is Zachary Boyd. And Zachary, on the morning of May 11th, 2009, jumped out of bed to rush to his job. And that day on the job, he did everything right. As an individual contributor, he executed his job perfectly. But because he had rushed to work, he wasn't dressed appropriately. Now, in the big scheme of things, would that have been a problem? No. But on this particular day, there was a photographer there taking pictures, just documenting the day. But that picture got shown around, and Zach knew the head of the organization is going to see this picture, and he's going to know I wasn't dressed. I wasn't prepared. So this is Zach Boyd. Zach was on the front lines in Afghanistan, and he rushed to his job that day because the Taliban was firing on them. So he shot back at the Taliban wearing pink I Love New York boxers and flip-flops. And yes, President Obama did see this picture because it was on the cover of the New York Post. So the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, said, anyone who will shoot at the Taliban in pink I Love New York boxers can defend me anytime. So if you are an individual contributor, do your job. Do your job. Know your role. When you know your role, then you can do what you're supposed to do and explain why things are happening when they're not supposed to. And if you're not confident in what your role is, pray about it. Ask God to help clarify that for you. Here's another way to look at being an individual contributor. There were two people in the early church, Priscilla and Aquila. We don't know them because they were tent makers. They didn't start the Roman Empire tent conglomerate. We know them because they helped Paul start the early church. Clearly, they had leadership skills. Clearly, they had that perseverance and determination to make a little church go. God wasn't using them in the workplace. That was not their calling. Their calling was the church. So if you're sitting in a cube thinking, is my career stalled? Maybe your career is not with a company. Maybe your career is with what God's building. And so when I can get my heart and my head wrapped around that God has me doing something for him and he takes care of the rest, then being the individual contributor that I am frees me to be the best that I need to be at work, along with his help, and then go into the leadership that I need to do elsewhere for him. So that last part, how are capable and God-reliant compatible? Well, the truth of the matter is they don't have to be. I could be capable and do my job just fine and never, ever bring God into it. But if I have him on my side, I have the option of having him on my side all the time. Can you imagine going into a meeting and you're able to say, you know what? I've got this. It doesn't matter how many notes I have because I know I can have that calm that passes understanding because the Holy Spirit's with me. I know that I am capable in my job, and where I'm not capable, God's going to provide an opportunity for me to learn if I'm willing to accept it, if I am a willing participant in my own learning, and I look at God providing opportunities for me. There are days in my work where I feel in over my head. Jennifer mentioned I speak engineer. Yeah, I didn't start at Carmack speaking engineer. Thankfully, I started in a department where we were all trying to figure out how we worked together, what we were doing. It was a new department. So I was able to learn engineer along with the rest of the group trying to figure out what we were doing. But when I need that calm, when I need to know that presence of God is with me, I look to the long version of the Serenity Prayer. And it simply says, God, take and receive my liberty, my memory, my understanding and will. All that I am and all that I have, you have given me. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as he did the sinful world as it is and not as I would have it, trusting that if I surrender to his will, he will make all things right, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy in the next with him forever. That helps me get centered. That helps give me the courage. That helps me know where my courage comes from. And courage sums up a whole lot about what we need to know at work. I will tell you, in the past 5 years, my husband and I have both been laid off multiple times. But with those layoffs, not a single one of those was a surprise to God. He knew the last job that my husband took that lasted only 5 months was a temporary job. God knew that. God provides for us every month. And when I go into a job knowing that God's taking care of me, then I don't have to be too worried about what's going on with the company. I can entrust myself to him, and he takes care of the rest. So you made a list of some words. And backing up to the thought of out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So what was your heart thinking when I said the word payday? One gentleman yesterday told me he wrote down candy bar. I thought, I can resonate with that heart. I like his heart. How about day off? Was day off a good thing, or did it all of a sudden bring this sense of, I have so much to do at my house? What if it brought a sense of gratitude for the home you have? What about cell phones? And you may get some generational observations on the word cell phone. The fourth one was meetings. And maybe for some of you, meetings at work wasn't a big deal, but maybe church meetings were a big deal. What were you thinking? The fifth one, coworkers. Anybody draw really mean, ugly faces with horns and stuff? Or did you make a list of people that maybe becomes a prayer list? Those are people you know need to run into Jesus everywhere they go. And finally, your boss. What did you think of with your boss? And the retirees probably drew a face with the tongue sticking out. Na, 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 na. So here's the thought. With what you wrote down, was there anything on there that you want to change about that heart? What motivated you to write what you wrote? In Romans 12:2, Paul writes, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Let me close with this. When I switched from teaching high school to going to corporate America, my uncle at that time was the chairman of the board of the company, and he was a huge mentor to me. So when I needed something, I could just show up or call him, and he would let me know, well, this is how it works in the business world. So this one day, I was up in the executive level because I had a meeting with one of the vice presidents, and I was sitting there waiting. And while I was waiting, my uncle got off the elevator that was over to my left, and I saw him get off the elevator. He had all these charts, and his entourage was with him with all these papers, and he dead stops. And he goes, do you need me? And I said, oh, no, I have a meeting with somebody else. I'm good. He goes, well, if you need me, you come by. And I said, okay. So, Christian, let me remind you, the chairman of the board, the creator of the universe, when he hears your voice, he dead stops in his tracks to ask you what you need. He listens to you. He is more than happy to change his schedule. And for those of you sitting here who don't get this Jesus stuff, who just think, this still isn't me, or maybe you have my experience of, I just don't do that church stuff. That same God, that same chairman of the board, he's ready to listen to you. In fact, you can check your inbox. He sent you a meeting request, but he's not pushy. He just keeps sending those meeting requests. So it's no mistake that you're here. He invited you. He led you. So if you want to talk to him, he is available. If you need help with that conversation, there are lots of people with Needles Eye Ministry who are happy to talk with you, or I certainly would. So, friends, I hope today that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart have been encouraging to you, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. What an incredible message. We've been privileged to hear this several times, and it is wonderful and has been each time. Yesterday and the day before, we took some questions, one or two, from the audience because it just seemed like a really wonderful message to do that. So let me ask you, is there someone here who has a question for Laura? It could either be relative to her work or even personally. Anybody have a question? Very quickly? Oh, now come on. Somebody, we have no plants, so we could have done that. Yes, ma'am.
Where was the Bible study, and under what auspices was it founded?
So the question is,
Bible study that you went to when you were little.
where was the Bible study and what was it founded under?
Exactly.
So it was the Bible study open to, I don't know, am I supposed to plug other groups? It was community Bible study. Yes. And I went to Christian Women's Club after I went to community Bible study as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was founded under the pretense of, just come, just learn. And that was a huge help to me. And I know there are several other Bible studies. Needles Eye has tons of Bible studies with kind of the same context of, it doesn't matter about church. And, when you can put aside all of those doctrinal issues that have separated the denominations, then you really get to the heart of God. Yeah, thanks.
One more.
None from my husband.
Yeah, we'll exclude several people, Tony. One more real quickly. How about something relative to work specifically? No one?
No, they got elected.
All right.
Yeah.
You hit a home run. Didn't need
Thanks.
any answer? Thank you, Laura. I'd like to close by echoing Laura's comments toward the end. I am of the opinion, and I think many of you in the audience are as well, that things do not happen by happenstance. I think we're all here for a reason today. Certainly the reason, beginning with listening to Lara Finnie's wonderful message about her life. But I also believe there are people here in this audience that came either because of a request from a friend or a colleague, maybe saw it on the internet, or however. But you're here not really coming understanding a lot of what you heard relative to this person of Jesus Christ. But now you're intrigued. You will remember when you leave the imagery of the inbox. There is nothing that is truer than that point. God will regularly send us messages, and we can use the imagery of an inbox. That's certainly who we are today. He stands ready consistently to meet us where we are. We just have to take the opportunity to move forward. He won't force himself on us, but he will 100% of the time be available and come to us and answer our prayers if we are sincere. So for those of you who haven't quite connected with this person, Jesus Christ, I really want you to take those points away with you. And I want to take you through, coming back to this confidential card that I asked you to begin to fill out the bottom portion of earlier. I'm going to have a prayer, and then I'm going to bring you back to the card. We'll finish filling it out. I'd like for you then to turn it face down, and we'll collect them after you leave, and then we'll be on our way. But before we do the card, would you bow with me for a closing prayer, please? Lord, we thank you that you are a God who stands ready to meet us and to answer us and to be involved in our lives when we but ask. An incredible truth. And perhaps even equally incredible to the reality of that truth that we will celebrate in a couple of weeks. Your Son's dying for us and defeating death. Father, I pray for each of us in this room, particularly those who really haven't quite yet connected with the understanding of a personal God who died for us to make it right with him. And I pray, Father, that you would take this message that Laura has shared so personally and cause it to work within each of our hearts to bring us closer to you. And I pray that all in your Son's name. Amen.